All right. Good morning, everyone. How are you today? Welcome to Fasting Space. So nice to have you here. I hope you're doing well. I am your host, Dr. Zimmermann, and I always tell friends, hey, just call me Phil. I'm Phil. So if you're hanging out on my little YouTube channel, then I say, you're a friend. Phil is great. And if I'm hanging out with a friend, one of my favorite things to do is just head to a coffee shop, grab a coffee, and hang out and chat. So that's the kind of vibe that I'm going for here, and hope that we're accomplishing that. A nice space to chill out. Chill out is kind of the vibe that I always want to have. And especially today, because I'm going to present, I think, some interesting information to you about some physiology in the body, about how our body handles cold. And so nobody has to stress out. I'm not going to tell anybody, oh, you got to go freeze yourself or anything. But have an open mind. It's been kind of an interesting exploration this week, reading about some of these things. I think you might find it interesting. Good morning. Love the sunshine. Nice to have you here. Hope you're doing well. We had a big cold snap last week here in Madison, and I went down to the lake by my house. I took this picture for the cover photo for this. I really liked this picture with the ice. It's just the way the sun hits it and the ice is lighting up and glowing. I thought it was so pretty. So I'll use this as a little vibe to help us chill out here in the winter. I always thought about making a video. I made the video in the fall. Fall is for fasting. About, I was hanging out with these trees and watching the leaves falling and giving some reflection on the season. And I thought, I should come up and make a video, every season and have like a seasonal series. I don't know if we're going to get to it in the winter. Like winter is for fasting. It's pretty easy to get some vibes that way, just hanging out in the woods and, the trees are hunkered down, no leaves, no energy coming in. They're kind of, sleeping. It's like the tree is sleeping over winter, just like we sleep. A big chunk of a simple fasting space is like sleeping, right? We're just kind of sleeping through that space. So I kind of like that thought. I don't know if we'll get to a specific video on it. Maybe next winter. So cold is not something that we think a lot about in a health space. If you look online into like fitness communities, a lot of people have been getting into cold. Like I think during the pandemic, it started ramping up in the fitness community of saying, like taking an ice bath, people putting these cold plunge things in their house, people spending thousands of dollars, influencers and stuff especially, and that way they can take pictures of themselves, doing the ice bath and people challenging themselves. I remember, I ran track back in high school, and even back in high school, we had, an ice bath in the training facility. And, you'd have a hard workout, say, get in the ice bath. And it was, it's a little brutal to go through in a tank all filled up with ice, water, and then get in it. It's hard to do. But I remember that even then, and there's increasing literature now, that this can reduce inflammation, reduce joint pain, muscle discomfort. And I experienced that even back then, when I was 17, hard to do, sit yourself for 10 minutes in some ice bath, but man, don't you feel better when you're done? Now, that's not anything I ever stuck with. And I probably, from that point, I never thought about doing something like that. basically ever again until you start seeing people doing it online. And I said, well, I kind of remember that. But here I've been doing a little more reading and research about it as I've been studying metabolism, trying to understand, there's really an interesting connection between fasting and how our body handles that space, and then how our body handles a cold exposure to keep us warm. And I'm going to go through that for you today here. Pat says, should have been a bear. Feast all summer, hibernate in the winter. Yeah, I think about that a lot, actually. I have this whole list of videos I want to make. And one is a nature series on different lessons that we can learn from animals fasting. And bear is certainly on the list, thinking about hibernating. And when I was doing that fall video, I was thinking a lot about seasonality and how we can embrace seasonality in our lives more. And there can definitely be seasons for fasting and leaning into it, seasons where it's not so much the thing. We talked about that over the holidays too. And bear is good. What's interesting, the physiology in a bear is actually the metabolism of a bear when they're hibernating actually goes down to almost practically nothing. Like they are conserving their heartbeats like I don't know, something crazy, like once every 20 seconds or something like this. They're just bringing things down. It's almost the opposite physiology for fasting that people have and we were going through some of this in some other videos too, that especially the first 10, 14 days of human fasting physiology, the body is actually ramping up the metabolism. We're increasing the fat utilization as opposed to the bear that is fasting. Try to conserve as much as possible. Very interesting. So we could dive into that in some other session, I think. So as I was learning about cold, I was reading some articles, thinking about, okay, what are all the ways that we help people to improve their metabolism, improve blood sugar? These are my top focuses. Improve health, wellness, well-being, is the broader and probably more important thing, right? And it might have been actually a paper, I don't think I have it here, that I ran into on cold therapy for depression, that people are using cold therapy pretty effectively in some of these reports to treat depression. It's such a shock to the system, right? Have you ever jumped in a cold pool? Have you jumped in a cold lake? We had this thing at a summer camp that I attended that was polar bearing, where, if you would get up in the morning, you'd go jump in the cold lake, before everybody else is getting up. And if you did it every day, you get a little polar bear badge. So there's another cold exposure I have. Some people, have you ever seen this? People do this. I don't know if it's such a big thing in America, other Scandinavian countries, people jumping in cutting holes in the ice and just jumping in. That's like extreme polar bearing. Human beings do all kinds of things, I tell you. And these people like it. I watched an interview with some people who are doing this, jumping in the ice water. They're so happy. They're just like, oh yeah, it's hard to do. But then the more they do it, see, this is the parallel with fasting. You talk to the average person in America and say, oh, do you want to try fasting? They say, oh my God, it's like the last thing people ever want to do, until you meet somebody who does it and is skilled at it. And they're like, oh, I actually like it. Actually I learned how to do it, and then my body felt better. And I think cold exposure is actually a lot like this. And it's intimidating to think about, but when you approach it in a thoughtful sort of way, actually, you can learn to do it. So let me dive into some of the things I was reading this week. I'll bring you up to speed on some of these thoughts, and then we can have a broader discussion about it. All right, now I'm not going to go through these papers. What I can tell you about the papers is like, this isn't really going to be like a scientific lecture on like evidence. People, in medicine really like, oh, we want like the evidence. The research in people on cold exposure for weight loss specifically, really in its infancy, I would say. So I'll show you these two papers. I'll leave them as references, but I'm not going to dig into them. This one is basically says like a lot of the research is basically in animal models, mouse models, and in mice who have graded cold exposure. The main finding that they found is increased insulin sensitivity, and that they are better controlling their blood sugar. So, that's a fascinating anecdotal point. And then I found this study, effective cold exposure, and this one is in people. And basically what it found, is that, they can document, okay, people who are having cold exposure, burning a lot more energy. It is amping up their metabolism. And of course, that's nice to see. But the thing that I really want to dive in and show you, the most interesting thing I found, is this article. All right, so people say, well, I want to lose weight. And what they really mean by that is they want to burn off body fat, right? You don't want to just lose weight. You wouldn't want to lose muscle, for example. We want to get rid of body fat. And people think, oh, fat, it's just like a thing. But it turns out that fat is more than one thing in the body, which in and of itself is a fascinating, thing to learn. So if the research, in studies of cold on people is not developed, the actual physiology, this is what is like pretty developed. And so to see this physiology, I think is really fascinating. All right, so this isn't very long, okay? Adipose tissue, that's fat tissue, okay, comes in two main types. The white adipose tissue, this is the site of energy storage in the body. And then we have brown adipose tissue. And that stores lower level of fat, but it can be activated to maintain body temperature, all right? So we have two functions of energy in the body, in the fat. We have energy storage is one goal, and then we have regulating and maintaining body temperature. And two functions. We don't really think about the way that body fat regulates and maintains body temperature. And we'll get into that. So these two types of fat, are composed of two types of cells. We have the white and the brown adipocytes. So adipocyte is the medical technical term for a fat cell, okay? Whereas the brown adipocytes, I'll show this picture bigger in just a sec. Brown adipocytes have many mitochondria. So are you familiar with mitochondria? So mitochondria are the structures in our cells that actually convert the main types of energy, like glucose and fat. They convert it into the actual form of energy that the cell uses called ATP. So ATP is the actual energy that the cell uses right in the cell. And pretty much everything we eat or could use as energy gets ultimately turned into ATP. And mitochondria is what does that for us. White adipocytes have few mitochondria and a single large lipid droplet. All right, and I'll show you this picture. And then we have uncoupling protein 1 is present exclusively in the brown cells. Okay, so here I'm going to blow up this for you so you can see it. So here's the type of cell. Here is what like a fat storage cell looks like. And this is what we want to go after, right? We want to lose weight. We want to target this energy and get rid of it. What's really fascinating to realize, if we gain weight, we say we put on fat, we don't actually increase the number of fat cells that we have, right? The white adipocytes. We don't grow more of them. We just fill them up with this fat storage, right? And it blows them up bigger, right? And that's what happens when we gain weight. And we don't get more of these. We also have the same number of these things, these brown cells. But look at these arrows between here. What's amazing is that the body can create this third type of cell, which is like an intermediate cell. They're calling here a bright adipocyte, some call it a beige adipocyte. It's like a hybrid where the white cell can essentially turn itself into a brown cell. And it starts expressing the uncoupling protein. So what the uncoupling protein is, there's a whole series of steps to convert our body energy into this ATP energy. And usually the cells of our body just flow through that process. All the ATP comes pouring out. But in these specialized sorts of cells, we have an uncoupling protein where the process is derailed and essentially the energy is just wasted. Now, a lot of articles say it's wasted. It's not really wasted. It's just being used for a different purpose. Instead of generating the ATP to power our body and move our muscles and stuff, it's just directly lost through the cell as heat. So it's basically turning our cells into little heaters that heat up the body. So our body is always running. We have a metabolism. It's always operating. I remember in some science class somewhere, they were talking about like the efficiency of a system. And they were talking about how efficient the human body is. They're saying like a car, when you put gas in the car and you're burning up the gas, you know how like you get done with your trip, the engine's hot, right? It's just heat pouring out of it. That's all energy that's lost. It's inefficient, right? They're saying that car, I can't remember exactly, but it's something like 10% efficient or something like this. Only 10% of the energy is actually driving the car forward. The rest is getting lost to sound and heat and all this sort of stuff. But then the human body is like 50% efficient. So like the food gets turned like half of it into the actual ATP that is powering the body. But really it's not like that because we're warm-blooded, right? We are maintaining this internal body temperature. And if our cells were ultimately efficient, they're converting everything in the ATP, no heat. Well, then that energy that the body's generated wouldn't be keeping us warm. And so the body is always monitoring our temperature and it will control. Now, it can't do this in the short term. In the short term, what our body can do is shiver, right? So if you are getting out in the cold and you're too cold and the body can't maintain your body temperature in the short term, you'll start shivering, right? And that is lots of muscle contractions, and that's burning the ATP, right? That normal process in the body. But that process, shivering and muscle contraction, look at all these chemicals. I won't go through all this. Myokines, these are muscle-based hormones that are activating a conversion of the white cell to the brown cell. So this is what I think is so fascinating. You can convert white cells in the body to these functionally brown cells. And then you can start, here's a whole nother pathway to start burning body fat that is independent of our exercise and normal metabolism. And this is what is so fascinating. Get back to the paper here. Dynamic adipose tissue. This is what people need to see. So adipose tissue, that's the fat tissue, incredibly dynamic and responds to external stimuli, okay, and dietary cues, all right? Plasticity, that means like changeability of the fat cells is demonstrated. Yeah, this is basically what I'm saying. Sustained cold exposure is one of the main drivers that can convert these white fat cells into the brown cells and that we can use for keeping us warm. So fascinating. And then a couple other points I just wanted to bring up. So it's mainly cold. Mainly cold is what drives it. Some place in here, they also had some things about diet. Maybe that takes us off topic. But it was saying turmeric and capsaicin, so like hot peppers. I'll link to this paper. I don't have to read through it all here. Some dietary factors can increase this also. But the cold is what we're going to dive into today specifically. Shifting the balance from just these white cells over to the brown, a whole nother mechanism for fat burning. So what does that look like in practice? How do we operationalize that in a way that is like functional for the average, person? That is what I am interested in exploring. The first thing I guess I will say about it is, okay, nobody has to do it, right? I'm intimidated by it just as much as anybody else. Warm is comfortable, right? Absolutely, just like eating is comfortable. And I have the same sort of thoughts about this and approach to fasting as I do to cold. So if we put this in context, okay, how are different ways, I should put this up, how are different ways that we can attack this fat cell? We want to get rid of it, right? Really, we can never get rid of it. We just want to shrink down this storage part of it. Well, we can exercise, right? So that's one pathway. And then we said, we can practice fasting. There's another pathway. Because people don't realize, okay, people think, how do you burn fat? You exercise, all right? All the time we have a metabolism that's running. We're just sitting here. What is happening? It's not nothing is happening, right? The heart is beating. We're breathing in and out. All these functions are happening in our body. We're running our cognitive process. All that takes energy. And so when we start exercising, we're still doing all those things. We're adding everything else on top. So even without exercising, we're still running that metabolism, right? So you put all that into a fasting space. Now you're putting all the pressure on the storage. So that's a pathway. And so you say, okay, Dr. Z, I see the physiology. There are these brown cells that can have a whole nother pathway, burn it for heat. So the two practical spaces, being in an environment that is colder, okay, that's one way to do it. That like an ambient environment. Here we are in the winter. So, even, I was going to say not if you're in Florida, but even Florida these days is cold, right? So if you have some exposure where your body has to raise that temperature, right? You can feel it when you're on that edge if you're going to start shivering. The shivering, right, is the message that the body is sending, like, we're not adequately controlling our temperature. The body is trying to bring it up. In the short term, those muscle contractions burning up the ATP, that's still burning energy, right? That's many little exercises, shivering. Not super pleasant, right? But that is what is sending the signal to the body to produce more of these cells. Now, in the cells that we all have some of these, right? We have some of these cells. And as we're experiencing that, the body temperature is going down. We start having some shivering. That signal right away, whatever brown cells we have activated, they're going to be getting activated right away. And they're going to be running these uncoupling processes to give us heat. And so we can burn up that energy. And then the same thing we're doing, we're training the system to do that. And these hormones will be converting more of our fat, that is the white cell, into the brown cell. So the next time we do it, we're going to be burning more body fat each time. So this is, just like I say with fasting, something you can gently ease into and train your body to handle over time. And that's true. I never have people dive in hard on fasting. I would say I always want this to be a space of exploration, a positive space, something that is reducing our stress, something we use primarily as a mental health practice. All this is the same with cold exposure. And because the body responds and adapts over time. Just like with fasting, it can get easier over time because the body builds out the channels to handle it. That's the same thing that happens in this process. As we slowly increase the cold exposure and our body adapts to it, it gets easier over time because we convert more of kind of our inactive white fat cells into the more metabolically active brown cells. Then when this the burden is put on the body, the temperature is dropping, well, now we have more of these brown cells to respond. We don't feel as cold, right? That's what's so amazing about it. And then we can train ourselves to handle it over time. Let me know if this is making sense. So how do you approach it? I say you approach it the same way that you might approach a fasting. And if you are in an environment where you can do it outside, okay, getting outside when it is cooler and allowing yourself in tiny bits to get a little colder than you comfortably would, okay, that would be a step. And you don't have to push it. Of course, you never want anyone taking anything to any extreme, just like you don't want to take some fasting process to an extreme where you're uncomfortable, or you're saying, well, this is horrible. How can you dip your toe in a water where you're just giving your body, the first taste of it, and the body's like, oh, okay, like I see what's going on, and you don't push it, maybe you just do this for a minute the first time, or not even, like just look into it, right? So one thing is being outside, and then the other, people, like I was saying at the beginning of the show, influencers, you got tons of money, you can invest thousands of dollars in an ice bath. I would never do that, When you got a shower, right? You can take a shower, right? You don't have to be cranking this thing all the way up to hot all the time. And this is, this is a place where I started. So I'm the type of person, I practice what I preach, right? I do fasting. I have spent a long time, I don't know, the last year has been an exploration of this topic for me personally, not to lose weight, but for more than anything as a mental health practice. And I have definitely found significant benefit. Have you ever done it? Jumped in the cold lake, in a cold pool, taken a cold shower, and it's like, oh man, it's intense. But then like 2 minutes later, you're out and you're like, whoa, you're amped up, right? You feel much better. Absolutely. I've experienced that a lot. I've had a few other benefits I'll tell you about as well. But the easiest place for me, and the place where I think most people can start, and this would be like dipping your toe in the water. Myself personally, I always took hot showers. Like I never even considered a hot shower so comfortable. Why would you ever take anything but a hot shower? Maybe a starting practice is just to take a lukewarm shower. You don't even have to have cold, right? Can you get yourself, in a shower where you're not blasting yourself with heat all the time? And can you just be comfortable in a lukewarm space? Like that would be a way to move toward it, where you're just getting the body used to it. And so it's not such a shock. Like if you always took hot showers and you never ever took a cold shower, you have like literally no cold exposure in your life, which is most people. And then you just start blasting yourself on a dead cold shower. It's going to be painful. It's going to be hard, which, you can do. People do hard things. You can do it. My experience though, especially in the winter, oh my gosh, it's much easier to take a cold shower in the summer, no doubt. To try this, here we are starting this, we're in the winter, we're embracing the cold. Okay, be super gentle on yourself. If it's cold where you're at, you don't have to even do it in the shower. You can use, so a little bit of outdoor exposure thoughtfully. Use a lukewarm shower and just slowly work into it. I worked into taking colder showers over many months. And it doesn't have to be just a cold shower. So a lot of times, honestly, I will take a lukewarm to moderately warm shower. The soap works better. And then crank the thing down and end it cold. And really kind of amp things up. And then just figure out, like, how long do I want to tolerate this for at the end? And sometimes it's not very much. And sometimes it's more. And that's like the introductory practice. That's so much easier than any of the, stuff you see online, getting in an ice bath or something like that. You can, if you are curious about it, you watch on YouTube, you type in, ice bath, you can watch people sitting in these things for 45 minutes. That's like way beyond a level of anything that I have ever personally done. And it's something that, obviously nobody ever has to do, but, people report significant benefit from it as well. So, there's a lot of open space to explore. I will say personally, taking a cold shower in the winter, one of the main also benefits I've noticed, I've struggled with eczema for a long time, and the cold does not dry out the skin like the hot does. And so I've had definitely improvement in eczema. Many people report that. Mental health benefits, skin benefits, vascular benefits, that's another thing. As you train the body to do it, you're actually training the blood vessels, the little capillaries, to handle it. And I also, in the winter, would get Raynaud's phenomenon. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but that's basically gone away since it has gone away since I've been doing some cold exposure. So I think a bit about, mother's classic advice, right? Mom's advice stereotypically is like, put your hat on, like telling the kids, like, don't go outside without your shoes on, put your jacket on. I think a lot about, okay, is that like conflicting advice? Like, what is it? And what I think it is like we don't train ourselves. Like, if you don't train yourself, immune benefits, there's more research of it. There's all these topics we could dive into. If we don't train ourselves, we never have any cold exposure. And then we just throw ourselves at a cold exposure and we haven't trained the body for it. I don't think that that's very good. Can you be hurt by cold? Sure. I mean, you can get frostbite and you can get hypothermia, and all these things are not good. But if we train ourselves thoughtfully, we're going to put ourselves in a much stronger position where it's going to be much more unlikely that we would develop something like that. And that also, if our body is much more likely to tolerate it, then can we withstand it without getting ill? If we are not prepared for it and all of a sudden everything is freezing and our body is not handling it because we're out of balance, right? Then I think, maybe this is an observation people have made. In that sort of scenario, are people more likely to get sick? Maybe it is the case. But in people, a whole interesting area of research that we could dive into, that actually our immune function is optimized as we train ourselves with graduated cold therapy. So that's the way I'm kind of reconciling those things in my mind, that we'll be stronger physiologically, metabolically, if we challenge our system in this way. Just like challenging our system with some fasting makes us stronger, helps our metabolism. Here's a whole different avenue where we challenge our body, step out of our comfort zone a little bit, and then we can bring a greater level of health and resiliency and strength to our body by training ourselves in this way. Let me know if you have thoughts or questions about that. I guess the thing that I will leave you with, I think these are most of the thoughts I wanted to share about it, is just about the mindset. So the thing that I want to communicate more than anything else, I think about this. What is the mindset that you have about it? A mindset to practice fasting, right? That's a strong mindset. That is a mindset of someone who's very thoughtful, very committed, very diligent, definitely thinking for themselves, definitely thinking long term, right? Same sort of mindset about a cold exposure. And in the short term, maybe even more intense. To stand there in the shower and actually turn the crank down on yourself and say, I'm going to experience some cold, right? That is a mental toughness to do that. That is a type of mental strength in and of itself. I think that process rewards itself. Like, say, am I the type of person that is okay being a little uncomfortable in the short term in order to achieve something good and healthy and in the body? In that way, a fasting is very similar. Sometimes I think about too, like, it's not always convenient for us to exercise. Exercise, of course, I'm extremely supportive of. There's a pathway toward health, sometimes not convenient. Fasting, oftentimes more convenient than exercise. But like, sometimes I think, okay, someone went and exercised, then they took a shower. Like, what if you didn't do the exercise, but you just took the shower, right? But you made it colder, and you put that burden on the body. Instead of the exercise burden, we put the cold burden, let the body work on that a little bit. Certainly a way to save time. You say, look, I'm so busy, I can't get to the gym. Okay, but I got to get ready. I just take the shower, get a little bit cold. I'm putting some pressure on those white cells to turn them brown and release their energy and burn them up. See, I just want to show it's just different options that we have of ways to approach it. And I'm kind of happy just to have this as a resource now on the channel, just to realize, hey, nobody ever has to do it. This is not a core practice, right? Cold is not a core practice. The core practice, getting good exercise, eating healthy food, and then dialing in a comfortable amount of fasting, to bring things into balance. But here's I would call an auxiliary process, potentially more than anything about developing a strong and powerful mindset to approach life and the journey that we're on toward better health. So those are my thoughts today on that. Happy to take any other questions if you have any other questions while we're here. Otherwise, I probably wrap things up soon. As I am usually do, I cut things off, and right after I hit the button, then a question comes in. I hope it's a good week for you. I hope wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, that it's a good week. That you can move forward in a thoughtful, positive way. Obviously, we're all under a lot of stress, right? Everything that we're doing. Can we use these health practices that we've been discussing as centering spaces that help us cope and manage with the stress? We can't really escape from stress. But can we manage it in a way? Can we cope with it in a way that helps us move forward with our health goals toward better health in the midst of it? I like the analogy of like a sailboat. Someone who's skilled at, sailing, you can't necessarily sail right into the wind, but, you can get an angle where you can make progress forward even into the wind, and you kind of zigzag across it and move ourselves forward. And so I like that. We've got cross currents, we've got wind coming at us, right? That's life. We want to set the rudder. Sailboat without a rudder cannot sail anywhere. It's just going to get blown about by the wind. So what is the rudder that can help us, even if it's a tiny bit, just make tiny bit of progress against the wind every week? Probably fasting, to bring it home for many people, is like the rudder that can help us to maintain, keep an eating window, keep us moving forward, even if we can't do every other good thing we want. All right, real nice to share this space with you today. I hope you have a great week. Keep in touch with me on the channel over the week, and I will look forward to seeing you back here next Sunday.